From Johannesburg, South Africa, I have Pat Mahlangu, youth brand enthusiast. It's nice to have you around on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon, Africa.
So, as at the time when a lot of people felt African businesses secured quite a number of investment funds, one would have thought that they would have scaled up their business operations and they would have become, a brand or brands to talk about when you talk about other brands on the global space. But then we see a decline in these African brands. What are the factors you would say are responsible for this dip? Is it due to the love for all things foreign, or there is a mark that African brands are not meeting?
Yeah, I mean, at the core of branding or building strong African brands really is trust, right? And given the times that we find ourselves in terms of the economy, a lot of consumers default back to what they already know. You must remember that branding is a function, or building a strong brand is a function of time. So the longer your brand has been around, has been your consumers have been exposed to your brand, the more likely they'll fall in love with it. But also, there's a big role that media, play when it comes to building a brand. So you must remember that a lot of Africans are exposed to foreign media, right? And you cannot aspire to that which you are not exposed to. So if you consume a lot of American, for example, content, a lot of European content, and they showcase their way of living, they showcase their brands, therefore you're more likely to warm up to those kinds of brands that you see on screen. What Africa has not been able to do very well is, from a media perspective, is the drive of exposing made in Africa brands.
Okay, so you've talked about trust, but then we may need to look at other areas. Talk about the standard or the quality of goods or services being made available for the potential consumer. There are also issues of copycats and those who are not staying true to their brand. There's also the issue of logistics and internalizing technology to scale up their operations. Now, why is it that African brands struggle with these various parameters? Why is it that they are not able to rise above these issues and make their brands, the type that other countries can embrace, that even Africans can be proud of and consume, and would want to also partner with them to scale up their businesses? Why?
Yeah, but remember, I mean, quality is subjective, right? Like I said earlier on in my response, when we're exposed to a lot of American, say for example, brands and products, you're more likely to associate products with quality. Also, if you look at made in China brands, for example, for the longest time, a lot of us thought that brands from China were of inferior quality. But if you drive around in Johannesburg, for example, you see a lot of Chinese cars on our roads than ever before. But what China has managed to do right is the fact that they were able to invest in their brand. They were able to also invest in research and development. So what we are lacking as Africans is also just belief in Africans, right? Meaning that whenever there's a young entrepreneur out there that's coming up with an idea, that idea can be backed up with a solid investment so that one day they can be of equal footing to their global counterparts. So investment is a big part, right? You cannot build a brand with just no money. So there's a lot of money that needs to be invested. Obviously, you need time and tenure to be able to grasp the consumer's attention. And lastly, like I said, innovation becomes a key part. You also touched on the distribution, of these products in and around the continent. We do know that from a continent perspective, we do have a logistical challenge whereby products are not moving, freely from one country to another. That obviously poses a big challenge for entrepreneurs in Africa. So if you can sort of have an infrastructure, that is good enough, that's going to handle the demand. I mean, there's big talks of intra-Africa trade, for example, whereby Africa is encouraged to trade with itself. but most of its goals will not be achieved in the current setting, whereby I cannot freely, move my products into Nigeria, for example, from Johannesburg, South Africa. If I cannot move my products freely from Ethiopia to Rwanda, somewhere, so there needs to be that infrastructure from a distribution perspective that allows African products and goods and its people to move freely. You remember, once upon a time, for example, to access, even to this day, it still does happen, where you have to leave the continent to come back into the continent. You're traveling from South Africa to, say, for example, Lagos, Nigeria. So those are some of the things that really will help in terms of driving the agenda of African brands forward. There needs to be political will, as we know with everything. Really, it starts there. The policies that favor local brands, and which again, what China did very well when they were in the process of industrializing their countries, whereby they gave a fair chance, for local brands to play before they allowed in their competitors. You look at a brand like Alibaba, for example, which is a behemoth when it comes to the e-commerce space. They were given a chance, and they blocked out external competition to allow for local brands to become competitive.
Okay, well, it's been said that all hope is not lost anyway, because when you look at the Nigerian and South African brands, they are said to be making waves. Now, let's quickly look at the financial and services sector. We talk about brands like the GT Bank, Standard Bank, Dangote, DSTV, and the likes that are said to still be making waves and being resilient in the face of challenges. Now, if you're going to be critical about their assessment, what are these ones or these companies doing to retain patronage across the continent?
I mean, again, time. I mean, if you look at the brands that you just mentioned now, for example, even MTN, which has been around for 30 years plus, so time has a big factor. I mean, if you look at Standard Bank, for example, which also has been around for, I think, over a century now, so those brands, I mean, have fully entrenched themselves in the market that which they operate in. So they also, what they do is they run campaigns, they buy media, they advertise, they are seen, they offer products that are also relevant, that are in demand, that are in need to African audiences. So all those factors coming together do lead to those brands, standing the test of time. For example, you mentioned Dangote, which trades in cement and in sugar and all these other products. Those are products that people, if you think about it, need on a daily basis. So they're able to entrench themselves in the consumers' lives.
Okay, so that's about it. Pat Mahlangu, youth brand enthusiast. I want to say thank you so much for talking to us at this time. I guess this one topic that we get to revisit, most especially as we also would have to look at what other brands that are coming up would need to do in order to meet up with these top brands are doing to have parity and have a strong market base for the African continent. But then we appreciate your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.